disgust you, you turn your head. And am I on?
Yes.
My friend Chris, highly respected, capable friend, has asked me to mention a little bit that I know about one thing that was wrongly done against Native Americans. That was the historic walking purchase. I believe related to the regime and the period of time that William Penn was so influential in the colonialization and land grabbing, if I may be honest, of the people that came from Europe. The walking purchase, a man was given so much time to walk in a rectangular area and blaze the trail enough to be followed, blaze the corners of it, turn 90 degrees, let's say to the south, go so far according to his judgment, turn 90 degrees back toward the point of their origin. But this is not meant to be totally disrespectful, but who knows whether he was capable of running a ways? Who knows the actual time span? Who knows the actual track keeping or record keeping of how much time he walked? But it was a considerable, hundreds of thousands of acres that just as a result of that walk became no longer Native American owned lands, and they would not contest the ownership of Europeans or whites to own and claim that land. The walking purchase, to me, I've never followed it that close. Mm-hmm. But that is reasonably factual. You can learn a great deal through history books.
Do you have any kind of firsthand knowledge of how Native Americans caught eels and dried eels and fish and that sort of thing to preserve them?
Chris has just asked about my knowledge of food preservation and storing the preparation of certain foods that could be stored during the winter, such as fish. The eel was very, very common in the Tunkhannock Valley, all of our rivers. The eel migrated all the way from the Sargasso Sea, clear back to his birthplace, where he was hatched by the eels that made the trip up here. The eel is a very, very interesting creature. I have eaten them. They're fun to catch. They give you a battle, but they were very valuable. And I can remember back in 1934, 35, a friend of mine whom I was fishing with got a tremendous eel down at below Falls, Pennsylvania, Harding, Pennsylvania, in the Tunkhannock. Big eel. I still have some of his skin, which I made lacings of. The shad was so plentiful, they come up the rivers in uncountable millions. And the Native Americans harvested them, smoked them, dried them, used salt for preservation, but smoke was one of the best preservatives known. But salt was beyond description in value of doing certain things.
Now, was salt traded somehow? How was salt?
The source?
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the greatest sources was salt springs that had a high sodium chloride content that was actually put in containers and slowly evaporated. Later, when they had copper, they could make evaporation vats, put them over fires, and evaporate the water. Unknowns to most people, the seawater was also used as a source of salt. But salt isn't the best thing that ever happened to people. Salt causes a lot of problems, like high blood pressure. Salt, that's an enemy to anyone who is afflicted with hypertension or high blood pressure, so to speak. I am one of those people. The salt shaker, we've parted company pretty much. Sometimes I think about it, but it is not a very important in my food. But Chris also asked about the preservation of other foods. Berries, nuts, tremendous value. So many people have lost their knowledge of the value of the hickory nut, the butternut. Most people I talk to have no knowledge of the butternut, related to the walnut, long and a different odor, a different shuck on the outside, a different texture of the shell casing, but a delicious, nourishing nut. I could still locate and show tremendous accumulation of shells that were thrown away along the Susquehanna, not far from Mahoopany and Laceyville. There was the greatest number of walnut trees. There's a town up there, Black Walnut, named for the abundance of the black walnut. Hickory nuts, hazelnuts, well, there were horse chestnuts, but they're pretty much inedible. But the walnuts, very important. And in later years, the English walnut, which was from the Maryland, the farthest north, they were brought up into Pennsylvania. I know a beautiful big English walnut tree near Nazareth, Pennsylvania, delicious big nuts. My grandson and I used to go there and gather them, crack them, and eat them. But the walnut, Pennsylvania, and clear down into this country, I have native walnut trees growing on my property here in Ideal. But the walnut was delicious, but there's a great number of, not a great number, a few different types that have different characteristics. Flavor, hardness of the shell, thickness of the shell, like hickory nuts. But the hazelnut, which are getting rather rare, you don't find many hazelnuts anymore. There is a relative of the hazelnut from Europe. Oh, I forget what the slang name for them, but they're related to the hazelnut. They're still common, and you get them in mixtures of Christmas varieties and bags and assortments of nuts. There's a great lack of knowledge of every type of fruit that they use. The blueberry, the blackberry, even the native wintergreen berries, which are delicious. They had a medicinal effect. The dried leaves were used, probably mixed in kinnikinnick, the tobacco, traditional, mixed with tobacco, and undoubtedly sumac leaves, and our common, I forgot the name of it, but it's growing in my yard here. Anyway, there were mixtures, and this is related to the tobacco plant. I don't believe that tobacco was commonly known until probably 500 to 600 years ago when it started to move up. They say tobacco originated in Peru or somewhere in northern South America. That we don't know. It flourishes and grows anywhere. That common weed, pokeberry, it's a good bird food. It is said that our people used it for jelly, jam, and that even fermented juice of the pokeberry became an occasional wine product. It has a leaf very similar to tobacco. It grows high, the same shape, the blossoms are similar. I worked in tobacco fields. It's a sticky, nasty thing, budding tobacco, so that the growth would go into the leaves instead of into seed pods, which are unnecessary. The seed of the tobacco is finer in some cases than coarse black pepper. They started seed beds, took very close care of them, and transplanted the seed in desirable areas, and tobacco became a very, very important plant. It was exported to England, to Europe, all other places in the world. And tobacco got widespread and became a product of agriculture more or less worldwide.